Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Okay, so you know how everyone has that one app they swear they'll delete, but never actually do? For me, it was Tinder. I know, super cliche. But honestly, I was bored, lonely, and figured, hey, maybe I'd find someone cool. I swiped through a bunch of profiles, mostly guys with blurry pictures and bios that were, like, 2 words long. Then I saw him. His name was Liam, and his profile picture was actually, like, good. He was standing on a beach, the sun setting behind him, and he had this kind of mysterious, intense look. His bio was short but intriguing, looking for someone to explore hidden places with. Hidden places? Okay, that got my attention. I swiped right and bam, instant match. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly witty and intelligent, not like the usual hey or WYD messages I was used to. We talked about books, movies, and our favorite hiking trails. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a major plus. After a few days of texting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed a date that was, well, a little unconventional. He wanted to take me to this abandoned observatory a few hours outside of the city. He said it was a really cool spot with amazing views, especially at night. A little voice in the back of my head was screaming red flag. But another part of me was ridiculously curious. I mean, an abandoned observatory? That sounded way more interesting than grabbing coffee at Starbucks. I told my best friend, Chloe, about the plan, and she basically freaked out. "Are you insane?" she said. "You're going to meet a guy you met on Tinder in the middle of nowhere? That's literally how horror movies start." I tried to reassure her that Liam seemed normal, and that I'd be careful. I even sent her his profile and told her to track my location on my phone. The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I kept second-guessing my decision, wondering if I was making a huge mistake. But I'd already told Liam I'd go, and I didn't want to be a flake. So, I got ready, trying to project an air of confidence that I definitely didn't feel. I wore jeans, a comfortable sweater, and sneakers, practical, but hopefully still cute. The drive to the observatory was longer than I expected. The sun was starting to set, and the landscape was becoming increasingly desolate. As we turned onto a dirt road, my anxiety ratcheted up a few notches. The trees were thick and gnarled, casting long, eerie shadows. The observatory loomed in the distance, a dark, imposing silhouette against the fading sky. When we finally arrived, the place was even creepier than I'd imagined. The building was crumbling, with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. Liam seemed unfazed, though. He grabbed a flashlight from his car and said, "Ready to explore?" We walked inside, and the darkness was almost overwhelming. The only light came from Liam's flashlight, which cast dancing shadows on the walls. The silence was broken only by the sound of our footsteps and the occasional creak of the building settling. We climbed a winding staircase, the steps groaning under our weight. As we went higher, I began to notice strange things. There were symbols painted on the walls, unfamiliar symbols that looked almost ritualistic, and the air grew colder, heavier. I could feel a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. We finally reached the top floor, where the telescope dome was located. The view was incredible, even in the dim light. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and the stars were beginning to emerge in the sky. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Liam started talking about the observatory, about its history, and the scientists who had once worked there. He spoke in a low, almost hypnotic voice. He told me about the theories they had, about searching for signals from other worlds, about unlocking the secrets of the universe. Then he turned to me, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. He said, "I brought you here because I knew you were special. I knew you understood. I didn't understand. I just wanted to go home." He reached into his backpack and pulled out something that made my blood run cold. It was a book, bound in what looked like human skin. The symbols on the cover were the same ones I'd seen on the walls. He opened the book and began to read aloud, his voice rising in a strange, chanting rhythm. I was terrified. I tried to back away, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. He pulled me closer, his eyes burning into mine. He said, "We're going to open a door to another dimension, and you're going to help me." I struggled against him, trying to break free, but he was too strong. He held me tight, continuing to chant from the book. The air grew thick with energy, and the room began to spin. I felt a strange tingling sensation all over my body, like I was being pulled apart. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. The chanting stopped. Liam gasped and stumbled backwards, clutching his chest. I looked up and saw Chloe standing in the doorway, holding a heavy wrench. She'd followed me, just like I asked. She'd heard the chanting from outside. "Get away from her," she yelled. Liam stared at Chloe, his face contorted with rage. He lunged towards her, but she swung the wrench, hitting him squarely in the head. He collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Chloe rushed to my side, helping me to my feet. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, still in shock. I think so." We stumbled out of the observatory, leaving Liam lying there on the floor. We didn't call the police. We just ran as fast as we could, until we reached Chloe's car. We drove back to the city in silence, neither of us speaking a word. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd escaped a terrifying situation, thanks to my amazing best friend. I deleted Tinder, swore off online dating forever, and tried to put the whole thing behind me. But then, a few weeks later, I got a message from Liam. It wasn't a text message or an email. It was a message on my phone's weather app. I know it sounds crazy, but the location was set to the abandoned observatory, and the forecast said, "The door is open. Come back." That was when I realized the truth. Liam wasn't just some weirdo I met on Tinder. He was something else, something much more sinister. And he wasn't finished with me yet. I didn't call the cops. Instead, I set the location to his house and sent him a weather forecast. "I'm coming." Picture this. Late October. Leaves crunching under your feet. The smell of pumpkin spice, everything assaulting your senses. I was scrolling through Tinder, bored out of my skull, procrastinating on a history paper about the French Revolution. I swiped right on this guy, Liam. He had that whole artsy vibe going on in his pictures. You know, the kind where they're always in museums looking pensive, or holding a film camera like it's a baby. Not usually my type, but his profile said he liked obscure indie bands and old movies, and honestly, I was just looking for someone to talk to who wouldn't judge my addiction to reality TV. We matched, and he messaged me almost instantly. He was witty, charming, and surprisingly normal. We talked about music, movies, books, the usual stuff. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, which was a refreshing change from the endless stream of WID messages I usually get. We texted for a few days, and then he suggested we meet up. He proposed this little cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched furniture and overpriced coffee. I figured, why not? It's just coffee. What's the worst that could happen? The cafe was exactly as I pictured it. I got there a few minutes early and grabbed a table near the window. Liam showed up right on time. He was taller than I expected, with these intense green eyes and a smile that could probably melt glaciers. He was dressed casually in a faded band t-shirt and jeans, but he somehow managed to make it look effortlessly cool. We talked for hours that day, about everything and nothing. I learned that he was a photographer, working on a project documenting abandoned buildings in the area. He showed me some of his photos on his phone, and they were actually really good. Haunting even, but in a beautiful way. We kept seeing each other after that. We went to concerts, walked around the park, even spent an afternoon volunteering at an animal shelter. He was always thoughtful, always respectful. He remembered the little things I told him, like my favorite kind of tea or the name of my childhood pet. It was nice. Too nice, maybe. Then things started to get weird. It was subtle at first. He started asking me a lot of questions about my apartment. Not in a creepy way, just curious. Like what floor I lived on, how many windows I had, what kind of security system I used. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured he was just trying to make conversation. But then he started showing up at places I hadn't told him I was going to be. I'd be at the grocery store, and he'd be there, browsing the produce section. Or I'd be walking home from class, and he just happened to be strolling down the same street. He always had an explanation. He lived nearby, or he was just in the area running errands. But it started to feel deliberate. One night, I was watching a movie at home when I heard a tapping at my window. I live on the 3rd floor. I peeked through the blinds, and there he was, standing on the fire escape. He waved and smiled, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I opened the window, my heart pounding in my chest. He climbed inside, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. He said he just wanted to surprise me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I started pulling away after that. I made excuses, avoided his calls, canceled plans. He didn't take it well. He started sending me these long, rambling texts, talking about how we were meant to be together, how he couldn't live without me. I blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. I cautiously pushed it open, my hands trembling. The apartment was dark and silent. I flipped on the light switch, and that's when I saw it. His photographs. They covered every wall. Pictures he'd taken of me without my knowledge. Me walking down the street, me sitting in the cafe, me sleeping in my bed. He'd somehow gotten into my apartment and turned it into a shrine to me. I ran out of the apartment and called the police. They came and took a report, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless he actually threatened me. They advised me to get a restraining order, which I did. I also changed my locks and installed a security system. I thought I was safe, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. I started having nightmares. I dreamed that he was standing outside my window, staring at me with those intense green eyes. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, convinced that he was in the room with me. I was terrified to leave my apartment. I felt like I was trapped in a horror movie. I started seeing a therapist. She told me I was suffering from severe anxiety and post-traumatic stress. She prescribed me medication. It helped a little, but I still couldn't shake the feeling of dread. One day, my therapist suggested I try confronting my fears. She thought it might help me regain a sense of control. She suggested I go back to the cafe where I first met Liam. I was hesitant, but I decided to give it a try. I figured, what's the worst that could happen? I went to the cafe the next day. It was crowded and noisy, just like I remembered. I ordered a coffee and sat down at the same table where I had my first date with Liam. I looked around, half expecting to see him lurking in the shadows. But he wasn't there. I started to relax a little. Maybe I was finally starting to move on. As I was finishing my coffee, I noticed a woman sitting at the table next to me. She was middle-aged, with short, gray hair and a kind smile. She looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place her. She glanced over at me and smiled. "Excuse me," she said, "but are you my name?" I nodded, surprised. "Yes, I am. Do I know you?" "My name is Carol," she said. "I'm Liam's mother." My heart sank. I was about to get up and leave, but she stopped me. "Please don't go," she said. "I just want to talk to you for a moment." I reluctantly sat back down. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I know what Liam did to you," she said. "I'm so sorry. He's always been a troubled boy." I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. "He has a history of obsessive behavior," she said. "He's been seeing a therapist for years, but he stopped taking his medication a few months ago. That's when things started to get worse." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "He's not a bad person," she said. "He's just sick." I still didn't say anything. I was too shocked to speak. "I just wanted you to know that he's getting help now," she said. "He's in a psychiatric hospital. He's going to be there for a long time." She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of Liam as a child. He was smiling, holding a teddy bear. He looked so innocent, so vulnerable. "I just wanted you to see him as he really is," she said. "He's not a monster. He's just a broken boy." I took the photograph from her hand and looked at it for a long time. Then I handed it back to her. "I hope he gets better," I said. I stood up and walked out of the cafe. As I walked away, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was still angry, still hurt, but I wasn't afraid. I had faced my fear, and I had survived. I walked home, feeling lighter than I had in months. I went inside my apartment and looked around. The photographs were gone. The locks were changed. The security system was installed. I was safe, or so I thought. A week later, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I cautiously opened it, my hands trembling. Inside, there was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, sitting in the cafe, talking to Liam's mother. On the back of the photograph, there was a handwritten note. It said, "I'm always watching." The twist. The photograph was taken from inside Liam's mother's purse, angled perfectly. She was in on it the entire time. I'm not usually one to spill my guts online, but this whole Tinder thing went so sideways. I feel like I gotta tell someone. It's not like a jump scare horror story. More like the kind that slowly creeps under your skin and makes you question your own sanity. Seriously messed with my head. It all started, like any other mindless swiping session. I was bored, kinda lonely, and figured why not? I'd been single for a while, and my friends kept saying, "Just put yourself out there." So I did. Profile pic with my dog, a few witty lines in my bio, and boom, ready to mingle. Then I saw him. Liam. His profile was different. Not in a bad way exactly, but off. His pictures weren't your typical gym selfies or party shots. One was a blurry landscape, looked like a forest, all dark and moody. Another was a close-up of a really intricate carving on a wooden box, super detailed. And the last one, just his eyes, piercing blue, kinda intense. His bio was even weirder. Just one sentence. Collector of forgotten things. I know, red flags everywhere, right? But something about him intrigued me. Maybe it was the mystery. Maybe it was the fact that he wasn't trying too hard. Whatever it was, I swiped right. And he matched. We started chatting. And he was surprisingly normal. He asked about my job, my hobbies, the usual stuff. He was a good texter, funny and engaging, and he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. He told me he worked from home, restoring antique furniture. That explained the wooden box photo, I guess. After a few days of talking, he suggested we meet up. He suggested this cafe on the outskirts of town, a place I'd never heard of. It's called the Hidden Bean. I looked it up and it was a bit creepy. It had no photos and only 2-star reviews. I hesitated. This was already feeling different than the other Tinder dates I'd been on. But curiosity got the better of me. I figured, worst case scenario, the coffee's bad and I make an excuse to leave. The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent ages trying to decide what to wear, finally settling on jeans and a simple t-shirt. I wanted to look casual but still cute, you know? As I was walking there, the weather was awful. It was raining and there was fog everywhere. Visibility was low. As I drove towards the Hidden Bean, the area got progressively more rural. The houses thinned out, the trees got denser, and the road became winding and narrow. The fog was thick, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. I started to feel a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The cafe was even creepier than I imagined. It was a small, dilapidated building with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. The sign was barely legible, hanging crookedly from a rusty chain. There was only one car in the parking lot, an old beat-up truck. I almost turned around. I really should have turned around, but I told myself I was being ridiculous. This was just a quirky little cafe, right? Maybe the bad reviews were just from snobs. I took a deep breath and went inside. The interior was dimly lit and smelled faintly of mildew and old coffee grounds. There were a few mismatched tables and chairs scattered around, and a dusty counter in the back. Behind the counter stood Liam. He looked different in person. Taller, for one thing, and his eyes were even more intense than in his picture. He had this stillness about him that made me feel uneasy. He smiled when he saw me, and the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "You made it," he said, his voice low and smooth. We sat down at a table, and I tried to make small talk, but it felt forced. He answered my questions with short, vague responses, and he didn't ask me anything about myself. Instead, he just stared at me, those piercing blue eyes boring into my soul. He started talking about his work, restoring antique furniture. He described it with a strange passion, talking about the history and the energy that was trapped within each piece. He mentioned a specific piece he was working on, an old vanity table, saying it had a particularly strong presence. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. As we talked, I noticed something strange about the cafe. There were no other customers, and the barista, a pale, gaunt-looking man, hadn't said a word since I arrived. He just stood behind the counter, watching us with a vacant expression. I tried to ignore the growing sense of unease, but it was becoming impossible. I felt like I was trapped in some kind of weird, Lynchian nightmare. Then Liam did something that made my blood run cold. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. It was the same one from his profile picture, the one with the intricate carvings. He placed the box on the table and opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a single, tarnished silver locket. "This," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "belonged to the woman who owned the vanity table." He picked up the locket and opened it. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph. I couldn't make out the details in the dim light, but it looked like a portrait of a young woman. "She disappeared," Liam said, his eyes fixed on the photograph. "Vanished without a trace." He looked up at me, and his eyes were filled with an intensity that scared me to my core. "I think," he said, "she's still trapped inside the vanity table." I didn't know what to say. I was completely speechless, paralyzed by fear. Was he serious? Was this some kind of bizarre joke? Then the barista suddenly spoke. "She's waiting," he croaked, his voice raspy and unnatural. Liam smiled, a genuine smile this time, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "Yes," he said, "she's been waiting a long time." He reached across the table and took my hand. His hand was cold and clammy, and his grip was surprisingly strong. "I think," he said, "you can help her." I tried to pull my hand away, but he wouldn't let go. "Please," I stammered, "I don't understand." "You will," he said. "You will." He started to say something else, but suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. The cafe was plunged into darkness. I screamed. When the lights came back on, Liam was gone. The wooden box was still on the table, the locket still inside. The barista was still behind the counter, watching me with that vacant expression. I grabbed my purse and ran out of the cafe, not stopping until I was back in my car, driving as fast as I could away from that horrible place. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing Liam's face in my mind, those piercing blue eyes, that terrifying smile. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something truly awful. The next day, I tried to forget about the whole thing. I deleted Liam from Tinder, blocked his number, and tried to convince myself that it was all just a bad dream. But then, a week later, I saw something that made me question everything. I was browsing through an antique store, just killing time, when I saw it. An old vanity table. It was beautiful, intricately carved, and it looked eerily familiar. As I got closer, I noticed something else. A small, tarnished silver locket, lying on the surface of the table. I picked it up, my hands trembling. I opened it. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph. It was a portrait of a young woman. It was me, but not me now. Me from another life, another time. Dressed in clothes I've never owned, in a style I've never worn. But it was undeniably me. I slammed the locket shut and dropped it back on the table. I stumbled out of the store, gasping for air. I don't know what any of it means. I don't know who Liam is, or what he wants. I don't know why that photograph exists, or why I feel so connected to that vanity table. All I know is that something is terribly wrong, and I have a feeling that this is far from over. Okay, so you won't believe what happened to me last summer. Seriously, I still get the creeps thinking about it. It all started innocently enough, like most bad decisions do, with a swipe. I was bored, okay? Freshly single, and my friends were all coupled up, doing boring couple-Y things. So, naturally, I downloaded Tinder. It felt like a game at first, judging people based on a few pictures and a witty bio. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just someone to grab a coffee with, or maybe catch a movie. Then I saw him. His name was Liam, and his profile picture was this super artsy shot of him standing in front of a mural in some alleyway. He was tall, had this messy brown hair, and these intense blue eyes that seemed to look right through you. His bio was short and mysterious, looking for someone to explore the unknown with. Corny, I know, but it worked. I swiped right. We matched instantly, which, looking back, should have been my first red flag. He messaged me right away, complimenting my taste in music. I had a band t-shirt in one of my pics, and asking me what kind of unknown I was interested in exploring. I played it cool, said I was open to anything, and we started chatting. He was different from anyone I'd ever talked to. He wasn't into the usual small talk. Instead, he wanted to know about my dreams, my fears, the things that kept me up at night. It was intense, but also kind of exciting. I felt like he actually saw me, not just some girl on a dating app. After a few days of nonstop texting, he asked me out. He suggested this obscure little cafe downtown, the kind of place you'd never find unless you were actively looking for it. I hesitated for a second. I'm usually a pretty cautious person, but something about him was just so magnetic. I said yes. The cafe was even weirder than I expected. It was tucked away on a quiet side street, dimly lit, and filled with mismatched furniture and strange artwork. Liam was already there, waiting for me at a table in the back. He looked even better in person. We talked for hours that night. He told me about his travels, his passion for photography, his fascination with old books and forgotten histories. He was charming and intelligent, but there was also something off about him. He had this habit of staring, like he was trying to decipher some hidden code in my face. And his stories, while captivating, were often tinged with a darkness that made me uneasy. He told me about this abandoned mansion he'd explored in the countryside, a place rumored to be haunted. He described the decaying walls, the overgrown gardens, the feeling of being watched even when he was alone. It was a chilling story, and I found myself getting more and more drawn in. He started inviting me on these adventures. We drive out to remote locations late at night, places with creepy histories and unsettling vibes. There was an abandoned asylum, a forgotten cemetery, a deserted stretch of beach where shipwrecks supposedly washed ashore. Each time, I felt this mix of excitement and dread. I knew it was probably a bad idea, but I couldn't resist. One night, he took me to this old, run-down mill in the middle of nowhere. The place was falling apart, with broken windows and creaking floorboards. He said it was built on an ancient Native American burial ground, and that strange things had happened there over the years. As we walked through the mill, the air grew colder, and I started to feel this overwhelming sense of unease. Shadows danced in the corners of my eyes, and I could swear I heard whispers on the wind. Liam seemed to thrive on the atmosphere, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He led me to this hidden room in the basement, a small, circular space with a single flickering light bulb. In the center of the room was a stone altar, covered in dust and strange symbols. He told me it was used for rituals centuries ago. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The energy, the power. I wanted to leave, but I was frozen in place. He reached out and took my hand, his fingers cold and clammy. He started chanting something in a language I didn't understand. The light bulb flickered violently, and the shadows in the room seemed to deepen. Suddenly I saw it. A quick flash in his eyes, a look of pure, unadulterated madness. That was when I knew I was in serious danger. I pulled my hand away and ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the car. I drove back to the city in a daze, my mind racing, my body trembling. I deleted his number, blocked him on social media, and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. For weeks, I was terrified. I had nightmares about the mill, the altar, the look in Liam's eyes. I jumped at every shadow, every unexpected sound. I was convinced he was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. Then one day, I was scrolling through Instagram and saw a familiar face. It was Liam, but he looked different. He was smiling, relaxed, and standing in front of a hospital. The caption read, visiting my twin brother, Mark, at the state psychiatric facility. He's doing much better these days. I clicked on his profile and scrolled through his pictures. There were dozens of them, all featuring the same person, but with two different names, Liam and Mark. The pieces started to fall into place. The strange stories, the intense stares, the unsettling behavior, it all made sense. I had been dating a guy with a split personality, one who was apparently completely unaware of his alter ego's extracurricular activities. It was a relief in a way. At least I knew I wasn't being stalked by some evil cult leader. But it was also deeply disturbing. I had been so close to something truly dangerous, and I hadn't even realized it. I still think about him sometimes. About Liam and Mark, and the abandoned mill, and the look in his eyes. It's a reminder that you never really know who you're talking to online, and that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight. It all started with this guy, Mark. I swiped right because, well, he was cute. Not like movie star cute, but the kind of cute that makes you do a double take. He had these eyes, man, this intense, almost piercing blue. And his bio was kinda quirky, something about being a collector of moments. Creepy? Maybe a little. Intriguing? Definitely. We started chatting, and he seemed pretty normal, if a little intense. He asked a lot of questions about me, like really specific stuff. What was my favorite childhood memory? What was my biggest fear? What did I dream about last night? Looking back, it should have been a red flag, but I was just chalking it up to him being, like, super interested. Anyway, we decided to meet up. He suggested this coffee shop downtown, the kind of place that's all exposed brick and overpriced lattes. When I got there, he was already waiting, sitting at a table in the back. He looked even better in person. That intense blue gaze even more mesmerizing. The date started out pretty normal. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, all the usual stuff. But then he started steering the conversation back to me, asking more questions, digging deeper. He wanted to know about my family, my friends, my past relationships. It was starting to feel less like a date and more like an interrogation. He was telling me about his job. He works from home, something with computers, but when I asked what exactly, he got super vague, changing the subject back to me. Classic. Things got weirder after the coffee shop. He walked me back to my car, and as I was getting in, he grabbed my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong, almost painful. He looked me right in the eyes and said, "I feel like we have a real connection, Sarah. A very special connection." I just laughed it off, trying to play it cool. "Yeah, maybe," I said, pulling my hand away. "It was nice meeting you, Mark." But he didn't let it go. He started texting me constantly, like every hour. If I didn't respond right away, he'd send another text, then another. It was suffocating, and the messages were getting increasingly strange. He'd say things like, "I can't stop thinking about you," or "You're exactly what I've been searching for." I tried to ignore him, hoping he'd get the hint, but it only made things worse. One night, I was watching TV when I got a text from him that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of me, sitting on my couch, through my living room window. The curtains were slightly open. I freaked out. I slammed the curtains shut and locked all the doors and windows. I called my best friend, Emily, and told her everything. She was just as freaked out as I was. She told me to call the police, but I was hesitant. I didn't have any real proof, just some creepy texts and a photo. I stayed at Emily's house that night, too scared to go back to my own place. The next day, I went to the police station and filed a report. They took it seriously, but they said they couldn't do much without more evidence. For the next few weeks, I was living in a constant state of anxiety. I was always looking over my shoulder, afraid of seeing Mark. I changed my route to work, avoided going out alone, and even considered moving. Then one day, I got a call from the police. They said they had found Mark. He was dead. Apparently, he had been living in a storage unit on the outskirts of town. They found him surrounded by photos of me, hundreds of them. They also found a bunch of newspaper clippings about other women who had gone missing in the area over the past few years. The police said it looked like a suicide. They suspected he was planning to do something to me, and when he realized he was about to get caught, He took his own life. I was relieved, of course, but I was also haunted by the thought of what could have happened. I kept replaying the events in my head, wondering if I could have done something differently, if I could have seen the warning signs sooner. It took me a long time to feel safe again. I deleted Tinder and swore off online dating forever. I started seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma. Then, a year later, I was at Emily's birthday party. I was chatting with some of her friends, trying to make small talk, and then one of them mentioned Mark's name. "Oh yeah, Mark," she said. "He was such a weirdo. He used to work with my brother." I froze. "What do you mean? He used to work with your brother?" "Yeah," she said. "He was a programmer at some tech company. He got fired a few years ago for stalking one of his co-workers. It was a whole thing." "What was his last name?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I can't remember," she said. "Something weird." "Why?" I told her the whole story, about Tinder, the date, the texts, the photos, the storage unit, the suicide. She was horrified. "Wait," she said. "I think I know his last name. It was Holden. Mark Holden." My heart stopped. Holden. That was my father's last name. My father, who I hadn't seen since I was a little kid. My father, who had always been a bit of a mystery. My father, who had disappeared without a trace. I went home and started digging through old family photos. And then I found it. A picture of my father, young and smiling, with the same intense blue eyes as Mark. It all clicked into place. Mark wasn't just some random stalker. He was my half-brother. My father had another family, another life. And Mark had somehow found me, tracked me down, and become obsessed with me. He knew my biggest fear. He knew my biggest weakness. He knew me. He was blood. It's been years since then, and I still can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Every time I meet someone new, I can't help but wonder if they're connected to my past, if they're another piece of the puzzle I don't want to solve. I don't think I'll ever truly feel safe again. Dating in this small town is like trying to find a decent coffee shop, slim pickings. Anyway, I hadn't had much luck. Mostly just awkward coffee dates and guys who thought wearing cargo shorts on a first date was acceptable. Then I matched with him. His profile was different. No shirtless gym selfies. No group shots with his bros. Just a few photos of him hiking in the woods, looking genuinely happy. He seemed normal. His bio was short and sweet. Just looking for someone to explore the world with. Corny, I know. But after the parade of guys who listed fluent in sarcasm as a personality trait, it was refreshing. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly witty. Not in a try-hard way, but genuinely funny. We talked about everything, from our favorite books to our dream travel destinations. After a week of nonstop texting, he asked me out. We decided to meet at this old, secluded cabin restaurant just outside of town. I know. Meeting a Tinder date in a remote location probably wasn't the smartest idea, but something about him felt different. Plus, the restaurant had amazing reviews, and I was craving their famous apple pie. As I drove down the winding, tree-lined road leading to the cabin, the sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows. I started to feel a little uneasy, but I chalked it up to predate jitters. The restaurant was even more rustic than I expected. It was basically a log cabin, with a dimly lit porch and windows that seemed to peer out from the darkness. When I walked inside, the smell of wood smoke and cinnamon filled the air. He was already there, sitting at a table by the fireplace. He stood up when he saw me, and I have to admit, he was even more attractive in person. He had this kind smile and warm eyes that immediately put me at ease. The date started off great. We talked and laughed, and the apple pie was as amazing as everyone said it was. But as the evening wore on, things started to get a little strange. He started asking me really personal questions, like about my childhood, my fears, and my deepest secrets. At first, I thought he was just trying to get to know me, but his questions became more and more intense. He would stare at me with this unsettling intensity, like he was trying to see right through me. Then, he started talking about his past. He told me about how he had grown up in a family that moved around a lot. He never had a real home, never had real friends. He said he was always searching for a place to belong, a place to feel safe. His eyes started to well up with tears, and he reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong, almost painful. "I think I've finally found it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I think I've finally found my home." I tried to pull my hand away, but he wouldn't let go. His grip tightened even more, and I started to feel a sense of panic rising in my chest. I looked around the restaurant, but we were the only ones there. The waitress had disappeared, and the fireplace was casting dancing shadows on the walls, making the whole scene feel surreal. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just kept staring at me, his eyes filled with a strange, unsettling mix of longing and obsession. I tried to make conversation, but he was completely silent. He just kept holding my hand, his grip getting tighter and tighter. I was starting to feel claustrophobic, trapped in this remote cabin with a stranger who seemed to be losing his grip on reality. Finally, I managed to yank my hand away. "I think I should go," I said, standing up from the table. He didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, watching me with those intense, unsettling eyes. As I walked towards the door, I felt his gaze burning into my back. I practically ran to my car, fumbling with the keys as I tried to unlock the door. Once I was inside, I locked the doors and started the engine, my hands shaking uncontrollably. As I drove away, I glanced back at the cabin. He was standing on the porch, watching me. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just stood there, motionless, like a statue. The image of him standing there, alone in the darkness, haunted me for days. I blocked his number, deleted the app, and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible. I started having nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, convinced that he was standing outside my window, watching me. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through the local news website when I saw a headline that made my blood run cold. "Local woman missing. Authorities suspect foul play." The article was about a woman who had disappeared after going on a date with someone she had met online. The woman's name was Sarah, and her photo looked eerily familiar. As I read further, I discovered that Sarah had gone missing after going to a remote cabin restaurant just outside of town, the same restaurant where I had gone on my disastrous date. My heart started pounding in my chest as I scrolled down to the description of the man Sarah had been seeing. The description matched him perfectly. I immediately called the police and told them everything. I described him, the restaurant, the unsettling conversation, everything. They took my statement and said they would look into it. A few days later, they called me back. They had found him. He had been living in a small town a few hours away, under an assumed name. They had also found evidence linking him to several other missing persons cases, all women he had met online. He was a serial predator, preying on vulnerable women who were looking for love. I was relieved that they had caught him, but I was also deeply disturbed. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah and the other women who had fallen victim to his twisted desires. I also couldn't shake the feeling that I had been incredibly lucky, that I had somehow managed to escape a fate that could have easily been mine. But that's not even the twist. A week after they arrested him, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, sitting at the table in the cabin restaurant. The picture had been taken through the window, from outside. On the back of the photo, there was a single word written in red ink: home. The police investigated, of course. They checked my apartment, my car, everything. They found nothing. They said it was probably just a scare tactic, a way for him to continue to terrorize me from behind bars. But I know better. I know that he's still out there, somewhere. He's not in prison, because the man they arrested wasn't him. The police got the wrong guy. The real guy is still out there, watching, waiting, looking for a place to call home. And that, my friend, is why I still have nightmares. I'm still looking over my shoulder, wondering when he's going to find me again, wondering if he's already found someone else, someone who wasn't so lucky. I was stuck at home, scrolling through TikTok and feeling sorry for myself. That's when I re-downloaded Tinder. I know, it's a cesspool, but desperate times, am I right? I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just someone to grab a burger with, maybe catch a movie. Just like Human interaction beyond my mom asking if I'd emptied the dishwasher. Then I saw him. His name was Liam, and his profile was understated. A couple of blurry photos, one of him hiking, another of him looking out at the ocean. No shirtless gym selfies, no group shots with a bunch of brothers. Just him, and a short bio that said something like, into art, music, and exploring new places. He seemed normal, refreshingly so. We matched, obviously, and the conversation started out totally normal too. We talked about our favorite bands, the art museums we liked, the hiking trails around here. He was witty, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up. He picked a place I'd never heard of before, a small cafe tucked away in this kinda run-down part of town. I almost bailed, to be honest. It felt a little sketchy, but Liam seemed so cool, so different from a usual Tinder crowd, that I decided to give it a shot. The cafe was even weirder in person, dimly lit, with mismatched furniture and strange artwork hanging on the walls. The kind of place that felt like it hadn't been cleaned properly in years. But Liam was already there, waiting at a table in the back. He was even more attractive in person. Tall, with dark hair and these intense blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. He smiled when I walked in, and I instantly felt a little more at ease. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. He told me about his travels, his passion for photography, his dreams of opening his own art gallery. He was captivating, and I found myself completely drawn in. After the cafe, we started hanging out a lot, hiking in the woods, exploring abandoned buildings, which, looking back, should have been a red flag, going to obscure concerts in even more obscure venues. He introduced me to music I'd never heard before, showed me hidden corners of the city I never knew existed. It was exciting, and I felt like I was finally living a life worth living. But there were things that were weird about him. Little things, at first. He was always vague about his past, deflecting any questions about his family or where he grew up. He never used social media, which he said was because he didn't like being tracked. And he always seemed to be watching me, studying me, like he was trying to figure something out. Then the dreams started. Vivid, disturbing dreams where I was lost in a dark forest, being chased by something I couldn't see. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, feeling like I was being watched even in my own bedroom. I started to distance myself from Liam. I made excuses not to see him, claiming I was busy with work or family stuff. But he wouldn't let me go that easily. He started showing up at my house unannounced, leaving me voicemails that were increasingly frantic and unsettling. One night, I woke up to a scratching sound at my window. I peeked through the blinds and saw Liam standing in my yard, staring up at my window. He was holding a single red rose, and his eyes were empty. I didn't answer the door. I didn't answer his calls. I blocked him on social media, but he kept finding ways to get to me. He started leaving me gifts, strange, unsettling things like dried flowers, antique dolls, and handwritten notes filled with cryptic messages. I was terrified. I told my friends and family what was happening, but they didn't believe me. They said I was being dramatic, that Liam was just a little intense. They didn't understand. Finally, I went to the police. I showed them the gifts, the notes, the voicemails, but they said there wasn't enough evidence to do anything. They told me to get a restraining order, but that was all they could do. I felt helpless, trapped. I knew Liam was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow, jumping at every sound. Then one day, he disappeared. Just like that. No more gifts, no more notes, no more voicemails. It was like he vanished into thin air. I was relieved, of course, but I was also uneasy. It felt too easy, too sudden. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, somewhere, watching me. A few weeks later, I got a call from a detective. He said they'd found Liam. He was dead. Apparently, he'd been living under a false identity. His real name was something else entirely, and he was wanted in connection with a series of disappearances across the state. Women who had been reported missing over the past few years. The detective said they found a hidden room in Liam's apartment. It was filled with photographs, journals, and trophies. Items taken from the missing women. I was horrified. I couldn't believe I'd been so close to someone so evil. But here's the thing, the part that really messed me up. The detective asked me to come down to the station to identify some of the items they'd found in Liam's apartment. And that's when I saw it. A small silver locket. It was tarnished and worn, but I recognized it instantly. It was a locket that my grandmother used to wear. A locket that had been passed down through generations of my family. A locket that had gone missing a few months earlier, after my grandmother passed away, and we were sorting through her belongings. I didn't tell the detective. I just stared at the locket, my mind reeling. How did Liam get it? Why did he have it? Then it hit me. Liam hadn't just been interested in me. He'd been interested in my family. He'd known about my grandmother, about the locket. And that's when I realized the truth. Liam hadn't chosen me at random. He'd been watching me for a long time. He'd known my grandmother. He'd somehow gotten close enough to her to steal the locket. He hadn't just been a random guy on Tinder. He was connected to my family somehow. And I still don't know how. The police investigation is still ongoing. They're trying to piece together Liam's past, to figure out how he knew my grandmother, to understand why he targeted me. But I don't think they'll ever find the answers. Because the truth is, I don't think I want to know. Some secrets are better left buried. Some doors are better left unopened. I still have nightmares. I still jump at every sound. I still feel like I'm being watched. And I'll never look at Tinder the same way again. I never thought I'd be that girl. You know, the one with the dating app horror story that everyone whispers about at parties. I always rolled my eyes at those tales, thinking people were just being dramatic. But trust me, nothing could have prepared me for the absolute nightmare that unfolded after I swiped right on Jake. It was a typical Sunday night. I was bored, scrolling through Tinder, half-heartedly looking for something interesting. Jake's profile was pretty standard. A couple of pics of him hiking, one with a dog, always a plus, right? And a short bio about loving good food and adventures. He was cute, in a rugged, outdoorsy kind of way. We matched, exchanged a few messages, and he seemed totally normal, maybe even a little shy. We talked about our favorite movies, our jobs, and he even asked about my cat Mittens. Red flag number one should have been when he said he wasn't a fan of cats, but was willing to make an exception for Mittens. Ugh. Anyway, after a week of chatting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed a picnic at this secluded spot by the river, saying it was his secret escape. Now, I'm not usually one for meeting strangers in isolated locations, but something about him felt safe. Plus, I was craving some human interaction after being stuck inside all week. I told my best friend, Chloe, about it, just in case. She gave me the usual text me every hour speech, which I promised to do. The day of the picnic was gorgeous. The sun was shining. Birds were singing. The whole 9 yards. I met Jake at the designated meeting point, a small parking lot at the edge of the woods. He was even more attractive in person, with these intense blue eyes and a killer smile. He greeted me with a hug that lingered a little too long, but I brushed it off as him just being friendly. We walked into the woods, following a narrow trail that led down to the river. The further we went, the more isolated it felt. The trees grew taller, blocking out the sunlight, and the only sound was the rushing water. I started to get a little uneasy, but I told myself I was just being paranoid. When we finally reached the riverbank, I was relieved. It was a beautiful spot, with a small sandy beach and crystal clear water. Jake had already set up a blanket and a picnic basket. He pulled out sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of wine. It was all very romantic, or at least, it was supposed to be. As we ate, Jake started acting weird. He kept staring at me, not in a flirty way, but in a way that made me feel like I was being studied. He asked me a lot of personal questions about my family, my past relationships, my fears. I tried to deflect, but he was persistent. He just kept drilling me with the same questions over and over again. Then, he started talking about his ex-girlfriend. He said she had betrayed him and that he could never trust anyone again. His voice was low and menacing, and I could see the anger simmering in his eyes. I tried to change the subject, but he wouldn't let it go. He just kept ranting about how women were all the same and how he had been wronged. I was starting to freak out. I subtly reached for my phone and my purse, trying to send a text to Chloe, but I had no signal. Panic started to set in, I was alone in the middle of nowhere with a guy who was clearly losing it. I told him I had to go, that I wasn't feeling well. He just laughed, a cold, unsettling sound that sent chills down my spine. He stood up and blocked my path. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice now dangerously calm. "We're just getting to know each other." I knew I had to get out of there, but I didn't know how. I tried to reason with him, telling him that I wasn't his ex and that I didn't deserve to be treated this way. He just stared at me, his eyes empty and unseeing. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. He started dragging me towards the woods, saying he wanted to show me something. I screamed, but no one could hear me. That's when I knew I was going to die. I was kicking and screaming, trying to break free, but it was no use. He was too strong. He dragged me deeper into the woods until we reached a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a shrine. It was made of branches and leaves, and it was decorated with pictures of women. All of them looked eerily similar to me. I was horrified. This guy was insane. He was going to kill me and add my picture to his creepy shrine. He pushed me to my knees and started chanting something in a language I didn't understand. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the end. Then I heard a noise, a loud barking, followed by a woman's voice. "Jake, what the hell are you doing?" I opened my eyes and saw Chloe standing at the edge of the clearing with mittens in her arms. How did she find me? I didn't even think she knew where I was. Jake turned around, his face a mask of fury. "Get out of here, Chloe. This doesn't concern you." "The hell it doesn't," Chloe retorted. "You're scaring my friend." That's when it hit me. Chloe and I were always joking about how similar we looked, and we even dressed alike sometimes. But Jake, he didn't know Chloe existed. He thought I was someone else. Jake lunged at Chloe, but she was ready for him. She let go of Mittens, who promptly attacked Jake, hissing and clawing at his face. Jake screamed in pain and stumbled backwards, giving Chloe and me a chance to escape. We ran back to the parking lot as fast as we could, not stopping until we reached Chloe's car. We jumped in and sped away, leaving Jake behind. I was shaking so badly I could barely speak. Chloe hugged me tight and told me everything was going to be okay, but I knew it wouldn't be. I had just had the most terrifying experience of my life, and I would never be the same. The police caught Jake a few days later. They found the shrine and a whole bunch of other creepy stuff in his apartment. Turns out, he had a history of stalking women who looked like his ex. He was charged with kidnapping and attempted assault. I never saw Jake again, but I'll never forget him. He taught me a valuable lesson. Not everyone on dating apps is who they seem to be. And always trust your gut. But here's the twist. After everything happened, after the police investigation and the therapy sessions, I started to wonder, how did Chloe find me? I never told her exactly where I was going, just the general area. And there was no cell service in the woods, so I couldn't have texted her my location. So how did she know where to find me? I asked her about it one day, months after the incident. She just smiled and said, "Let's just say Mittens has a really good sense of direction." I laughed it off, but something about her answer didn't sit right with me. A few weeks later, I was at Chloe's apartment, helping her clean out her closet. I stumbled upon a shoebox hidden in the back, filled with pictures of me. Pictures I didn't even know existed. Pictures taken from my social media. Pictures taken without my knowledge. That's when I realized the truth. Chloe wasn't my savior. She was my stalker. She had been following me for months, maybe even years. She knew about my date with Jake, because she had been tracking my every move. The whole rescue was a setup. She had planned the whole thing, knowing that Jake was unstable and that he would eventually snap. She wanted to be the hero, the one who saved me from danger. I confronted her about it, and she didn't deny it. She just said she loved me, and that she couldn't stand the thought of anyone else having me. She said she did it all for me. I was disgusted. I cut all ties with her and moved to a different city. I still have nightmares about Jake, but now I also have nightmares about Chloe. I deleted all my dating apps and decided to stay single for a while, maybe forever. I'm not sure I can ever trust anyone again. It started, like most bad decisions, On a really boring Saturday night, I was scrolling through Tinder, half-heartedly swiping right on anyone who looked vaguely interesting, when I came across this guy named Ethan. His profile was pretty standard. A couple of pictures of him smiling, one of him hiking, because every guy on Tinder hikes, apparently, and a short bio saying he was looking for someone to explore the city with. Nothing screamed serial killer, so I swiped right. We matched almost instantly, and he messaged me right away. He seemed normal enough, maybe a little intense, but I chalked it up to him just being eager. We chatted for a few days, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He asked about my hobbies, my favorite movies, my dreams for the future, the kind of stuff you'd expect. He was pretty cute too, with kind eyes and this goofy grin that I found strangely endearing. He suggested we meet up for coffee, and I hesitated. I'd been burned before on Tinder dates, and I was starting to get that familiar feeling of dread creeping in. But I decided to give him a chance. We agreed to meet at this cafe downtown that I'd never been to before. It was a little out of the way, but he said it had the best coffee in the city. So I figured, why not? The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours trying to decide what to wear, eventually settling on a pair of jeans and a comfortable sweater. I wanted to look cute, but not like I was trying too hard. When I finally arrived at the cafe, I was surprised by how deserted it was. It was tucked away on a quiet side street, and the only other people inside were a couple of old guys reading newspapers. Ethan was already there, sitting at a table by the window. He stood up when he saw me and gave me a warm smile. He looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. We made small talk for a bit, and I started to relax. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. But as the date went on, things started to get weird. He kept staring at me, like he was trying to see right through me. His questions became more personal, more probing. He asked about my family, my childhood, my deepest fears. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He started talking about this project he was working on, but he wouldn't tell me what it was. He just kept saying it was something special, and that I would understand soon. His eyes had this strange gleam in them when he talked about it, and it made my skin crawl. Then, he started talking about my apartment. He said he'd seen pictures of it on my social media and that it looked cozy. He knew the neighborhood I lived in, even the name of my building. I hadn't told him any of that. That's when I knew I had to get out of there. I made some excuse about having to meet a friend and quickly paid for my coffee. As I was leaving, he grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Don't go," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I need to show you something." I pulled my arm away and ran out of the cafe. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, heart pounding in my chest. I drove straight home and locked all the doors and windows. I was terrified. For weeks, I was convinced that Ethan was stalking me. I kept seeing him everywhere, in the grocery store, at the gym, even outside my apartment building. I started having nightmares about him, waking up in a cold sweat, convinced he was in my room. I called the police, but they said there was nothing they could do unless he actually threatened me. I was living in a constant state of paranoia. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, and started carrying pepper spray everywhere I went. I was a prisoner in my own home. Then one day, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling. Inside, there was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, asleep in my bed. I screamed. I felt like I was going to throw up. I called the police again, hysterically telling them about the package. This time, they took me seriously. They sent a detective to my apartment, and he took the photograph as evidence. A few days later, the detective called me with an update. He said they had tracked down Ethan and brought him in for questioning. But here's the twist. Ethan was mentally unwell. He had a history of stalking women he met on dating apps, but he had never actually physically harmed anyone. He was living with his mother, unemployed, and spending most of his time online. The detective told me that Ethan had admitted to sending me the photograph. He said he had gotten it from a hidden camera he had installed in my apartment. Apparently, he had somehow managed to sneak into my apartment while I was at work and plant the camera in my bedroom. The police arrested Ethan and charged him with stalking and unlawful surveillance. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I could finally start to heal and move on with my life. But I was wrong. A few months after Ethan was sent to prison, I received another package in the mail. It was the same kind of unmarked box. I opened it with dread, my hands shaking. Inside, there was another photograph. It was a picture of me, sitting at my kitchen table, writing this story. But the angle was from outside my apartment window, and in the reflection of the glass, I could see a figure standing in the shadows, watching me. I don't know who it is, or how they got there. All I know is that someone else is watching me. And this time, they're not on Tinder. You're not going to believe what happened to me last year. Seriously, I still get chills thinking about it. It all started with a swipe, like it always does. But this one was different. Way different. I thought I was just looking for a fun summer fling. Maybe someone to hit up the beach with, you know? What I found was something straight out of a nightmare. So there I was, bored out of my mind one Friday night, scrolling through Tinder. Same old faces, same old cheesy bios. Honestly, I was about to give up and just watch Netflix when I saw him. Liam. His profile pic was kinda blurry, like he took it with a potato. But there was something about his eyes. Intense, you know, like they were staring right through the screen. He had one of those super vague bios, just a single sentence. Looking for someone who understands. Red flag, right? But my dumb self was intrigued. I swiped right, and we matched. Ugh, I should have unmatched right then and there. We started chatting, and he seemed normal enough at first. Asked me about my hobbies, my favorite movies, the usual get-to-know-you stuff. But then things started getting weird. He'd ask these really deep, personal questions, like about my biggest fears and my earliest memories. I chalked it up to him being deep, or something, trying to be different from all the other guys on the app. We talked for a couple of weeks before he suggested meeting up. He wanted to go to this old abandoned amusement park about an hour outside of town. Creepy, right? I should have said no. I really should have. But my curiosity got the better of me. Plus, I figured, it would be a good story at least. The amusement park was even creepier in person. The Ferris wheel was rusted and covered in vines. The carousel horses were chipped and faded. And the whole place just had this eerie, silent vibe. Liam was already there when I arrived, standing in the shadow of the roller coaster. He was taller than I expected, and he had this unsettlingly calm demeanor. We walked around the park for a while, and he told me about the history of the place. Apparently, it had been abandoned after a series of accidents, including a kid falling off the roller coaster and a fire in the funhouse. He told the stories with this strange fascination, like he was almost enjoying them. As the sun started to set, the park got even more unsettling. Shadows stretched across the ground, and the wind whistled through the broken windows of the arcade. Liam led me to the funhouse, which was by far the creepiest building in the whole park. The paint was peeling, the mirrors were cracked, and the air inside smelled like mold and decay. He started talking about his childhood, about how he used to come to the park all the time with his family. He said he had a lot of happy memories there, but there was this underlying sadness in his voice. He kept staring at this one particular mirror, a tall, ornate one that was slightly tilted. "This mirror," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It always showed me things that weren't there." I laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood. "Like what? Ghosts?" He didn't laugh. He just kept staring at the mirror, his eyes wide and unfocused. "Like the truth." He started walking deeper into the funhouse, and I hesitated for a moment before following him. The further we went, the more disoriented I felt. The mirrors reflected endless, distorted images of myself, and the air grew colder. I started to get a really bad feeling, like I was being watched. Liam stopped in front of another mirror, this one smaller and rounder than the first. He reached out and touched the glass, then turned to me with a strange smile on his face. "Do you see it?" he asked. "See what?" I said, my voice trembling. "The truth," he replied. "Look closely." I looked into the mirror, but all I saw was my own reflection. I shook my head. "I don't see anything." He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Look harder," he hissed. "It's right there." I stared into the mirror, trying to focus, but my vision started to blur. I felt dizzy and nauseous, like I was about to pass out. And then, for just a split second, I saw something. It was like a flicker, a brief image superimposed over my reflection. It was a picture of me, but older, much older. I was standing in a hospital room, holding a baby, and next to me was Liam. But it couldn't be Liam. He looked older too, but it was definitely him. And then the image was gone, and I was just seeing my own reflection again. I pulled my arm away from him, terrified. What was that? I demanded. He just smiled. The truth, he repeated. I didn't wait to hear anything else. I turned and ran out of the funhouse, out of the amusement park, and all the way back to my car. I didn't stop driving until I was back in my apartment, locking the door behind me. I spent the next few days trying to convince myself that I had imagined the whole thing, that the amusement park was just creepy, and Liam was just weird, and my mind had played tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. So, I did what any sane person would do. I started stalking him online. I found his Facebook profile, his Instagram, everything. And then I found it, an old news article about his family. His parents had died in a car accident when he was a kid, and he had been raised by his grandparents. But here's the kicker. He had a sister, and she had died in a hospital shortly after giving birth. Her name? My name. I spent hours searching for any other information I could find about her, about the baby. And then I found it, a birth announcement. My sister had a son. His name was Liam. He wasn't just some random guy I met on Tinder. He was my nephew. And he had found me. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know why he took me to that amusement park. All I know is that he knew who I was all along, and he wanted me to know too. I changed my number, deleted all my social media accounts, and moved to a different state. I still look over my shoulder, wondering if he's going to show up again. I guess some truths are better left undiscovered, especially when they stare back at you from a dusty old mirror in a forgotten funhouse. I still wake up sometimes in cold sweats, wondering if this is my new reality. And you know what's the worst part? His bio said he was looking for someone who understood. And I think, in a twisted way, I finally do. I understand that sometimes the truth is far more terrifying than any lie. Okay, so, you know how everyone has that one Tinder story? The one that makes you question all your life choices and swear off dating apps forever? Yeah, well, buckle up, because mine is a doozy. It's not just a bad date. It's the kind of story that keeps you up at night, wondering if you imagined the whole thing or if you genuinely dodged a bullet the size of Texas. It all started during the summer after freshman year of college. I was bored out of my mind, working a dead-end job at the local grocery store, and desperately trying to avoid my mom's constant nagging about my future. Tinder seemed like the perfect distraction, a way to meet new people, maybe have some fun, and definitely avoid thinking about organic chemistry. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just, someone to grab a burger with and maybe watch a movie. That's when I saw him. His profile was pretty standard. A couple of pictures of him hiking, one with his dog, major points there, and a bio that said something generic about enjoying good food and good company. He was cute in a rugged, outdoorsy kind of way. Dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that seemed genuine. We matched, and I figured, what the heck? We started chatting, and he seemed totally normal. He asked about my interests, my classes, my summer job. He even laughed at my terrible jokes. His name was Ethan, and he said he was a recent grad working as a park ranger at a state park about an hour away. We talked for a few days, and he suggested we meet up for coffee. I was hesitant at first. I always get nervous meeting people from online, but he seemed nice enough, and I was seriously bored, so I agreed. We met at a coffee shop in town. He was even cuter in person. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He was easy to talk to, and I found myself actually enjoying his company. He told me about his job, about the trails he hiked, the wildlife he encountered. It sounded like a pretty cool life. After coffee, he suggested we go for a walk in the park nearby. It was a beautiful day, sunny and warm, and the park was full of people. We strolled along the path, chatting and laughing. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, which was a nice change from some of the other guys I'd met. As the sun began to set, he suggested we head back to his place. He said he had a great view from his apartment and that we could watch the sunset. I hesitated. Going back to someone's place on a first date? That wasn't really my style. But he seemed so genuine, and I was having such a good time, that I decided to throw caution to the wind. His apartment was in a small town near the state park where he worked. It was a small, one-bedroom place, but it was clean and well-decorated. He had a balcony that overlooked the park, and the view was amazing. We sat on the balcony, watching the sunset and talking. He made me a cup of tea, and we just relaxed. As it got darker, things started to get a little weird. He started asking me personal questions about my family, my past relationships, my fears. I tried to brush them off, but he kept pushing. He seemed intensely interested in my answers, like he was trying to figure something out. Then, he started talking about the park. He told me stories about people who had gone missing in the park over the years, hikers who had wandered off the trail and never been seen again, campers who had disappeared from their tents in the middle of the night. He told these stories in a low, almost hypnotic voice, and I started to get a really bad feeling. He said that the park had a darkness to it, a history that clung to the trees and the rocks. He said that sometimes, when he was out on patrol at night, he could feel it, a presence watching him from the shadows. I tried to change the subject, but he kept bringing it back to the park and its dark history. He seemed obsessed with it. I started to feel really uncomfortable. I told him I had to go home, that I had an early morning. He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, watching me with those piercing blue eyes. As I walked to my car, I could feel his gaze on my back. I drove home as fast as I could, and I didn't relax until I was safely inside my own house. I tried to forget about the whole thing. I deleted his number, unfriended him on social media, and told myself that it was just a weird date, nothing more. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through the local news website when I saw an article that made my blood run cold. It was about a series of unsolved disappearances in the state park where Ethan worked. Hikers, campers, even park employees had vanished without a trace over the past few years. The article mentioned that the police were investigating a possible connection between the disappearances and a former park ranger who had been recently fired for suspicious behavior. The ranger's name was Ethan. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Was it possible? Could the guy I went on a date with be a killer? I immediately called the police and told them everything. They took my statement and said they would look into it. A few days later, I got a call from one of the detectives. He said that they had brought Ethan in for questioning. They had found evidence linking him to the disappearances, including personal items belonging to some of the victims in his apartment. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of kidnapping and murder. The detective thanked me for coming forward, saying that my information had been crucial in breaking the case. I was relieved that he had been caught, but I was also terrified. I had gone on a date with a serial killer. I had sat in his apartment, listened to his stories, and almost become another one of his victims. For months afterward, I had nightmares. I would wake up in a cold sweat, convinced that he was standing in my room, watching me. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, somewhere, waiting for me. I started seeing a therapist, who helped me to process what had happened. She told me that I wasn't to blame, that I couldn't have known what he was capable of, but it was hard to shake the guilt and the fear. Eventually, the nightmares stopped, and I started to feel like myself again. But I never forgot about Ethan. He was a constant reminder of how easily we can be deceived, and how important it is to trust our instincts. Then, about a year after Ethan's arrest, something even weirder happened. I was cleaning out my closet when I found a small, wooden box tucked away in the back. I didn't recognize it. I opened it up, and inside, I found a collection of old photographs. The photographs were of me. Not recent pictures, but photos from when I was a little girl. Pictures from my childhood, from family vacations, from school events. Pictures that I didn't even know existed. I was completely freaked out. How did Ethan get these pictures? He couldn't have taken them himself. He wouldn't have even known me back then. Then I noticed something else. In the background of one of the photos, I saw a familiar figure. A man standing in the distance, watching me. It was Ethan. But that wasn't possible. The photo was taken when I was 8 years old. Ethan would have been a child himself. I stared at the photo, tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Then I noticed something else. The man in the background wasn't just watching me. He was smiling. That's when it hit me. Ethan wasn't just some random guy I met on Tinder. He had been watching me for years. He had planned everything. He had known who I was, what I liked, what I feared. He had been waiting for me. The police investigated, of course. They looked into Ethan's past, his family history, his connections to my town. They found nothing. No link between us. No reason for him to have been stalking me. The case went cold. Ethan was convicted of the murders, but the mystery of the photographs remained unsolved. To this day, I don't know why Ethan was watching me, or how he got those pictures. I don't know if he had some kind of obsession with me, or if I was just a random target. All I know is that I got lucky. I dodged a bullet, and I will never, ever use a dating app again. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of our lives are really under our control, and how much is predetermined by forces we can't even comprehend? I still think about Ethan sometimes, and I wonder if he's still watching, even from behind bars. Okay, I think that's all I have to say about that. Honestly, just thinking about it makes me want to crawl under a rock and never come out. Okay, so, you know how everyone jokes about Tinder being a dumpster fire? Well, let me tell you, I didn't just find trash. I found something way, way worse. This isn't some "he looked different in person" story. This is the kind of thing that makes you sleep with the lights on for weeks. I still jump when my phone buzzes, and it's been months. I guess you could say it started like any other dumb dating app story. Bored, scrolling, swiping. I was stuck in this small town for the summer, visiting my grandma after freshman year of college. Population: approximately 1 million squirrels and 500 really bored teenagers who all hooked up in middle school. Tinder seemed like the only hope for not losing my mind. I saw him, Liam. Picture was kinda blurry, but he was tallish, had this intense look in his eyes, and his bio was something about being into exploring hidden places. Red flag number 1, maybe? But hey, I was desperate. And he was cute enough, in that mysterious, brooding kind of way. We matched, obviously. We started chatting, and he was actually pretty funny. Smart, too. Not just like, I read a book once, smart, but genuinely insightful. We talked about music, movies, even some nerdy stuff I'd never admit to discussing with anyone at school. He seemed normal. Well, as normal as someone who uses the phrase "hidden places" in their Tinder bio can be. We texted for about a week before he suggested meeting up. He wanted to take me to this abandoned old factory just outside of town. I know. Huge red flag. But something about him, the way he talked, the way he seemed genuinely interested in my rambling thoughts, made me feel like I could trust him. Stupid, right? The day of the date, I almost chickened out. I texted my best friend Sarah, telling her where I was going and to call the cops if I didn't text her back within 2 hours. Paranoid, maybe, but I had a really weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. Liam picked me up in this beat-up old Jeep. It smelled like pine needles and something vaguely metallic, which I tried to ignore. He was even taller in person, and his eyes were even more intense. He gave me this small, almost shy smile, and I started to feel a little better. The factory was way out in the boonies. Miles of dirt roads, surrounded by nothing but trees and overgrown fields. It was the kind of place where you could scream and no one would hear you. When we finally arrived, the factory loomed in the distance like a skeletal beast. Broken windows, rusted metal, the whole 9 yards. Cool, huh? Liam said, grinning. I forced a smile and tried to sound enthusiastic. We climbed over the fence, which was surprisingly easy, and walked around the outside of the building for a bit. Liam pointed out different features, explaining what they used to manufacture there. I pretended to be interested, but honestly, I was just trying not to trip over the piles of broken glass and twisted metal. Then he led me inside. It was dark and damp, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that filtered through the broken windows. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. We walked deeper and deeper into the factory, Liam leading the way. He seemed to know the place like the back of his hand. We passed through huge, Empty rooms filled with rusting machinery and piles of crumbling bricks. The further we went, the more uneasy I felt. Then we reached this room. It was smaller than the others, almost like a storage closet. There was a single window, covered in grime, and a bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room was a table, and on the table were pictures. Pictures of me. Not just random pictures, but pictures taken recently. Pictures of me walking to class. Pictures of me sitting in the park. Pictures of me talking on my phone. Pictures taken without my knowledge. My heart started pounding in my chest. I turned to Liam, my voice trembling. What is this? He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me with those intense eyes. A slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't the shy, almost cute smile from before. This smile was cold, predatory. "You're special," he said, his voice low and raspy. "I've been watching you for a while now. I knew you'd be the one." I wanted to scream, but my throat was frozen. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. I was trapped. He took a step closer, and I stumbled back, knocking over the table. The pictures scattered across the floor. As I scrambled to my feet, I noticed something else on the table, hidden beneath the photos. A scrapbook. I picked it up, my hands shaking. The cover was plain, unmarked. I opened it. Inside were more pictures. Pictures of other girls. Girls who looked vaguely familiar. Girls who had gone missing over the past few years. Each page had a picture of a girl, followed by newspaper clippings about their disappearance. The last page was blank. I dropped the scrapbook like it was burning my skin. I had to get out of there. I turned and ran, stumbling through the dark, twisting corridors of the factory. I could hear Liam behind me, his footsteps echoing in the silence. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to escape. I ran blindly, my heart pounding, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Finally, I saw it. A door, leading outside. I burst through it, stumbling into the sunlight. I didn't stop running until I reached the fence. I scrambled over it, tearing my clothes and scraping my knees. I kept running, all the way back to the Jeep. Liam wasn't there. The Jeep was gone. I was stranded, miles from town, alone, in the middle of nowhere. I pulled out my phone, my hands still shaking. No signal. I started walking. It took hours, but I finally made it back to town. I went straight to the police station and told them everything. They searched the factory, but Liam was gone. So were the pictures, the scrapbook, everything. They said it was probably just some prank, that I was overreacting. But I knew what I saw. I knew what he was capable of. I stayed with my grandma for the rest of the summer, but I never felt safe. I jumped at every shadow, every sound. I had nightmares every night. I went back to college in the fall, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I saw faces in the crowd that looked like him, heard voices that sounded like his. Then, a few weeks ago, I got a message on Tinder. It was from a new profile. No picture, no bio. Just one word. Found you. I deleted the app, changed my number, and moved into a different dorm. I'm still looking over my shoulder every single day. I don't know what he wants or what he's planning, but I know he's still out there. And the really messed up thing? I found out later that the factory, before it was abandoned, wasn't just a factory. It used to be a mental asylum. And my grandma, who's lived in this town her whole life, remembers a patient escaping years ago. A patient obsessed with collecting pictures. His name? You guessed it. Liam. The asylum records? They said he had a fascination with a specific flower. A flower that was pressed into my hand when I woke up after running away from the factory.